Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. A couple of years back, I found myself sitting across from an interviewer who posed this question: what achievement in your career are you most proud of? This gave me pause, considering I've been doing the same job for over 25 years. I allowed the fog of reminiscence to transport me. Jessica, the nursing supervisor. Alex, the program manager. Dr. Reynolds, the clinical director. Yep, I had 3 bosses. When I started on that unit, I was an experienced yet cynical RN. Soon I realized most of my coworkers were very young and green. For many, it was their first real gig. They assumed the bizarre occurrences were just normal workplace happenings. Jessica had banned writing incident reports for med errors or safety issues because it makes me look bad in safety meetings. Non-clinical personnel were permitted to administer meds, schedules changed without warning. On top of that, our department was easily the most toxic environment I've ever toiled in, with various cliques constantly at each other's throats. I could go on. The troubles erupted one day when I opened an email from Jessica tersely stating I was under investigation for an unspecified incident, instructing me to meet with HR for potential disciplinary action. No date, record number, or details were provided. I was ordered not to discuss it with anyone. I replied requesting that information, stating I'd consult my union rep and we'd meet at my convenience. Jessica refused to provide details, so I declined the meeting. Soon, I started getting increasingly threatening emails daily. I printed them all and contacted my sister, an employment lawyer. I tried not to shake every time I checked my inbox. I knew it was intimidation 101, but it's remarkably potent even when you're aware. Against orders, I brought it up in the break room. Before long, 3 other women approached me. They'd received identical emails that same day, minutes apart. Though we didn't share shifts or days, we agreed to involve the union and refuse meetings with HR. Jessica escalated, even cornering us in the hallway, chest to chest, trying to stare us down intimidatingly. He was an imposing figure. More and more women came forward. Jessica had a pattern of sending those emails, each one more menacing until the recipient caved, got vaguely disciplined, and was forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Apparently, he'd targeted the wrong 4 this time, as we wouldn't capitulate. I can't convey how much work time devolved into consoling crying colleagues recounting their ordeals. None had considered calling the union. They didn't know their Weingarten rights. We started strategizing, knowing our company historically protected perpetrators like this. Soon, the whole team united against our common foe. LGBTQ staffers wrote statements, with witnesses, documenting Jessica's grossly homophobic remarks, often in front of patients. Immigrant employees detailed racial slurs. One meticulous worker had compiled a dossier on every perceived Jessica policy violation and misdeed since her hiring, prepping it for HR. The burly night crew said, obviously Jessica's not messing with us, but we want to help. They dug into her social media, screenshotting homo, trans, xeno, and misogynistic posts. Unsatisfied, they paid for a background check, striking gold, DUI, failure to appear, hit and run, domestic violence, assault with a deadly weapon. How did the company miss this? Finally, 2 women came forward with sexual harassment claims. One incident occurred in front of the assistant manager, another documented via email. We were ready. We bombarded HR with meeting requests. The union rep coordinated our offensive, so on Monday we met about the simple harassment and intimidation. I went first, but HR seemed unimpressed. Tuesday, all LGBTQ and racially abused staffers filed formal complaints. They said the HR lady looked tired. Wednesday started with the background check, delved into policy violations, and culminated with well-evidenced quid pro quo sexual harassment. The union attorney was eager to proceed, per the rep's warning to HR. They assured her that wouldn't be necessary. That evening, Jessica posted on her office door about being away a few days, directing us to Alex or Dr. Reynolds. Overnight, housekeeping cleared out Jessica's office. The night crew kept her nameplate as a trophy. Come Monday morning shift change, the CNO, COO, and HR informed us Jessica was terminated, effective immediately. We sat politely until they left, then erupted in cheers, hugging, crying with joy, high-fiving everywhere. What achievement are you most proud of in your career? I sat up straight, smiled, and replied, I unified a fractured team to achieve a common goal. I like to think I excel at team building. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my quiet suburban neighborhood for over a decade now. It's one of those places where everyone knows each other and for the most part gets along. That wholesome dynamic shifted after the house next door to me got sold to a new owner named Karen. From the moment she moved in, I could tell she was going to be trouble. Karen kept entirely to herself at first. She never introduced herself or tried to get to know the neighbors. I chalked it up to her just being shy. Oh, how wrong I was. A few weeks after Karen moved in, I started noticing strange activity outside my house. Shadowy figures lurking around my property late at night, rustling in the bushes when I stepped outside. It was unnerving, to say the least. At first, I thought maybe it was some neighborhood kids messing around. But one night, I decided to investigate and discovered the chilling truth. As I scanned the perimeter of my yard with a flashlight, they came into view. Not one, not two, but 12 security cameras pointed directly at my house. My heart raced and I broke out into a cold sweat. This was no joke. Someone had deliberately installed high-tech surveillance equipment to spy on my every move. It didn't take Sherlock Holmes to deduce who was behind this invasive scheme. Karen's house had the perfect vantage point to capture my entire property on camera. Fury boiled up inside me as the realization sank in. My creep of a neighbor had set up an elaborate system to invade my privacy. The next morning, I decided to confront Karen. I marched right up to her front door, pounded aggressively, and as soon as she answered, I let loose. "What's your deal with spying on me from your house?" I demanded. "Do you realize how disturbing it is to have 12 cameras pointed at my property without my consent?" Karen's expression remained impassive, as if I was complaining about something as trivial as the weather. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied coolly. "I have every right to install security on my own property." I refused to back down. "You can't justify infringing on my privacy. Those cameras need to come down immediately or I'll get the authorities involved." Karen simply slammed the door in my face. I was fuming. Not only was she unapologetic about her actions, but she acted like I was being unreasonable. Well, if she wanted to play hardball, I knew how to hit back even harder. I immediately called my lawyer and explained the situation. He informed me that Karen's surveillance scheme was not just immoral, but also illegal. Peeping Tom laws strictly prohibited recording video or audio footage of someone on private property without their permission. Armed with this knowledge, I sent Karen a formal cease and desist letter drafted by my lawyer. I highlighted the specific statutes she was violating and gave her a deadline to remove the cameras or face legal consequences. A week passed without any action on Karen's end. The cameras remained fixed on my house. That's when I decided to pull out the big guns. I filed a lawsuit against Karen citing invasion of privacy and emotional distress. The day Karen got served the lawsuit papers was sweet poetic justice. The look of shock on her face when the process server showed up at her door was priceless. I watched gleefully from my window as the color drained from her face. Suddenly, the unflappable Karen didn't seem so cool and collected. As the court date approached, the tide clearly turned in my favor. Karen's lawyer informed her that she had no defense in light of the clear-cut laws around surveillance of private property. Her only options were to settle or risk getting slammed with massive damages in court. Karen reluctantly agreed to a settlement that involved permanently removing all cameras pointed at my house, signing a confession admitting her guilt, and paying a hefty sum for my legal fees and emotional anguish. The day I watched Karen clambering around her roof dismantling the cameras was one of the most satisfying experiences ever. To see her taking down the instruments of invasion she had arrogantly installed felt like sweet poetic justice. In the weeks that followed, Karen barely showed her face outside, clearly embarrassed by the entire fiasco. She had learned her lesson the hard way. You don't mess with someone's privacy without consequences. The neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief to see her brought down a peg or two. I also noticed a marked reduction in suspicious activity and eyes on my house after the cameras came down. While I was glad to have my peace and tranquility back, I slept with one eye open for a while, worried Karen might try something else. But the legal smackdown seemed to have scared her straight. She knew if she stepped out of line again, I wouldn't hesitate to take legal action once more. The entire saga just goes to show you can't underestimate the extremes some people will go to invade your privacy. But with the law on your side, justice can prevail, even against the creepiest peeping neighbor. The next one is a petty revenge story. 21 years ago, my mother-in-law signed my wife and me up for a Lamaze class. We were both in our early 20s and expecting our first child in a few months. While I am completely faithful, I could not help but notice that the instructor was extremely attractive. Even my wife muttered "damn" under her breath. The instructor bore a striking resemblance to Margot Robbie from The Wolf of Wall Street. She greatly annoyed many people by stating from the first minute that having a child is not an excuse to gain or maintain weight afterward. Several women, instantly offended, confronted her, claiming they were eating for two and questioning what a 21-year-old Barbie would know about this. The instructor calmly replied that eating for two is a myth and an excuse, not reality. She explained that at most you are eating for 1.1, and that a massive change in dietary habits is neither excusable nor necessary. Obviously, this did not sit well with many in the class. They ridiculed her appearance, youth, and lack of experience every week. On the final day, there was a knock on the door at the last minute of class. 5 little blonde youngsters entered. The instructor looked the rudest, also the largest, no coincidence, lady in the eye and said, "These are my babies. They are 2, 4, 6, 7, and 9. I am 30 and a registered nurse, and I run 6 miles daily. Thank you for taking my class, and go enjoy your giant dinner and dessert." Then she walked out, smiling the sweetest smile as she left with them. My wife burst out laughing loudly. I thought we were going to be attacked by 10 angry pregnant women, which made me cry from laughing at the absurdity of the idea, especially explaining it to our parents. Fortunately, that did not happen. Our son was born 3 weeks later, and our incredible instructor happened to be our nurse that day, present for every minute of it. To this day, that giant dinner line was the best mic drop moment I have ever witnessed. Our instructor is one of our closest friends. Our son is actually dating her youngest daughter, and yes, she is still extremely attractive. One final note, nurses are true heroes. Our actual doctor was in the room for maybe 15 minutes. Jennifer was by our side for 8 straight hours, and even showed up at our house to check on us. She also openly admitted that she planned that mic drop the moment she heard the dumb Barbie comment, and that her choice of wearing a tight tank top and leggings that day was definitely not a coincidence. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I have a patient who deals with occasional mental confusion. He usually has a personal aide, so he's used to getting whatever he wants when he wants it. I pride myself on being able to get along with and even build relationships with the most difficult of patients. But he has proved difficult to me due to the combination of entitlement and his confusion. He had his son visiting him today and was severely under the impression that his son was taking him home. Any attempt of explanation fell on deaf ears. His son left, but he didn't give up. He insisted I take him to the front door and let him leave, despite there being freezing rain and no one to take him anywhere. Eventually, after 3 times of him telling me to take him to the door and my futile attempts to redirect or reassure, he told me if I wouldn't take him to the door, he would write me up for insubordination. Cue malicious compliance. I figured why not? At least writing me up would keep him distracted from trying to leave, and it truly seemed like the only way to calm him down. There were at least 5 witnesses to what was happening, so I wasn't worried about facing any discipline. I grabbed the complaint form, a pen, and a clipboard for him. As I did this, the nurse caught on to what I was doing and started just laughing. I brought her the form and even helped him fill it out, spelling my full name for him and showing my name tag as proof that I was giving my real name. Eventually, I have to move to stand behind him because I can't hide my laughter. My director of nursing comes over and the nurse explained the situation. I bring the patient over to her and he hands the form in. I just have the biggest crap-eating grin as everyone is going purple trying to contain their laughter. My Don was a total bro about it and played along with it while also taking him to play bingo, satisfied that I was being appropriately reprimanded. The Don let me keep the complaint form as long as I completely scratched out his information and I framed it next to my Employee of the Month certificate. The next one is an entitled People Story. Some things are just hard to fathom. Our house is on a downslope and the front patio sits below the street. Even though we live in a metro area, our streets do not have sidewalks, just the street and a dirt area between the road and our fence. This area between actually belongs to the city, but as is usual, the property owners are required to maintain it. Last summer, I had just decided to give it a small makeover and had pulled up the bricks that had been framing the plant area and stacked them against the fence while I decided what I was going to do. One evening during this time, my family and I were sitting around our fire table out on the front patio enjoying a nice evening. My sons and their SOs had driven over to visit us, and one had parked on the side of the road in front of our fence. We were all sitting around chatting and having a nice time. I was sitting facing the upslope and happened to notice the shape of someone walking by, but between the car and our fence. Now that's not a big deal, I had just dug up the plants that had been there, but it was a little weird because this is a little tight and there was more room on the street side. I didn't think too much about it until I saw someone do it again. It's not a busy street, so there really was no need to go that way. I thought something was off because they had to deliberately make the choice to take a narrow path instead of the easier path, so I decided to see what was going on. I walked up the stairs and looked at the area between the car and fence. I was stunned to see that almost all of the bricks were gone. I looked down the street and there is the young 20-something boy riding away on a bicycle with some of my bricks in his baskets. What the hell? I yelled at him and he stopped and looked back. I walked over to him to ask him what was going on. Biker. EM. Me. What are you doing with my bricks? EM. They were just sitting there, so I thought I would take them. Keep in mind he had to park his bike and walk between the car and the fence to reach them, and 6 people were sitting 20 feet away, 3 facing his way. Me. Those bricks belong to me. Why would you think you could just take them? That's stealing. EM. I'm not stealing. They were on land owned by the city, technically true, and so they must be free to anyone. Me. No, that's not how it works. It may be city land, but I'm required to maintain it. And even if they were the city's, you would still be stealing the bricks from them. EM. Well, I was told differently, so I just decided I could have them. Me. Stop trying to justify stealing. I need you to take these bricks, on the bike, back to where you got them, and then go and get all the others you stole, right now. This conservation was repeated many times as he kept defending his actions, and it took over 10 minutes to convince him he had to return the bricks. He seemed so confused, looking at me with big sad eyes, like they were just sitting there in front of your house, so of course they're not yours, so I can just take them. Why are you accusing me of stealing? For a minute I felt like I kicked a puppy. Then I snapped out at it and explained again to him exactly how the land use works, how it's wrong to take anything that doesn't belong to him, and once again demanded he return all of my bricks. I watched him take them off his bike, then ride down the block and gather the rest, one load at a time, and restack them in front of the fence. I was steaming. I've never in all my life, 60 plus, come across a person so ignorant in how the world works. And I gather from what his roommates told him, there are more of them out there that think this way. By the way, it turns out they are college students renting a house. I feel very sorry for their landlord and teachers. The next one is an entitled parent story. This happened in 2009 when I was 15 and my sister was 11. I honestly don't remember it well. I had to call my mother to fill me in on some details, and it helped a little. My parents got divorced when I was 10. My mother got primary custody, but we stayed with my father for about 3 days a week, sometimes more. They took turns celebrating the holidays with us. We'd spend them with one parent in 1 year and with the other one the next. In March 2009, my father and his then-girlfriend, Molly, broke up after he confessed to cheating with the woman that eventually became SM. Years later, I found out that affair had been going on for almost 2 years by the time he told Molly. He introduced SM to us in May, on my birthday actually, and they almost immediately announced their engagement. From that moment, she started trying to force us all to be a happy blended family, which usually meant forcing us to do everything she, or sometimes my stepbrother, wanted and pretending my mom wasn't in the picture. SM and my dad started pushing her to leave us with them a lot more often than my parents had previously agreed, but she thankfully wouldn't budge. We started getting ready for the holidays in November, and SM started talking about a ski resort, hotel, I don't know, it was 14 years ago, that she wanted to visit with us. It was a 3-hour car drive from where we lived and was clearly more suited for couples, younger children, or the elderly. Neither me or my sister actually wanted to go, but before we could say that, SM asked us when we'd be done with school so that she could book it for a 2-week trip during our winter break. I was happy to be the one to break it to her. We'd spent Christmas and New Year's Day with my father and Molly the year before, so it was my mom's turn to have us. My father and SM called my mother dozens of times to try to convince her to let them take us, insisting that SM was excited to spend Christmas with us and that the previous year's holidays didn't count, because we'd spent them with Molly. My mom said no, as she'd already made plans, and the subject was dropped for a few weeks. Then, on our last day of school before winter break, SM picked me and my sister up from our schools. That was fine. We were supposed to spend a couple days with my father before the holidays. What wasn't fine was that the moment we got into her car, SM said, "We're going to the ski resort. Surprise." She proceeded to tell us that they'd already packed our bags for us and Dad would meet us there. I asked if my mom knew about this and she said, "Sure," but I knew that was a lie. I also didn't believe her when she said we'd only be there for a couple of days and would be back before Christmas. I figured they'd booked the 2-week stay they wanted and would probably guilt trip us both into staying once their couple of days were up. I was terrified. I didn't have a phone. My mom thought I was still too young to have one. Didn't trust SM, and I could see my sister was even more scared. I told SM we didn't want to go. She said, "Fine, let's just pick stepbrother up from school." We picked him up from school. SM said, "Okay, now let's go to the resort." I said again that we didn't want to go. She said, "Fine, let's just find a gas station and fill up." That pattern repeated itself about 6 times over the next hour. Every time I said we didn't want to go, SM would make up an excuse and pretend to forget my plea. As we were about to leave town, my dad called SM. I heard them fight for a few minutes about something, and then she hung up. Stepbrother asked her what happened, but she didn't answer. Then she said, "I'm taking you kids to your mom's." She turned the car around and took us home. When we got there, my mom pulled us out of the car and screamed at SM to leave, which she did. My mom was hugging us and bawling as if she hadn't seen us in years. She didn't tell me the full story until a few days later. Basically, my mom called my dad in panic because he'd never told her we'd gotten home, which he always did whenever he picked us up from school. He was hoping she wouldn't call until we were already at the resort. My father knew that lying would do more harm than good, so he told her their plans. He tried to spin it around as something my sister wanted, but my mother didn't buy it. She told him that if SM didn't take us back to her place, she'd call the police. My father and SM took my stepbrother to the resort. For a few months after, they bragged about all the fun they had and all the things me and my sister had missed. Stepbrother later confided in me that he actually hated it. He barely saw his mom while they were there, and he spent Christmas mostly alone in their room. SM called us both selfish for trying to ruin their holidays. My sister actually felt guilty for a while, and I had to reassure her. My mom didn't call the cops or press charges. At the time, she didn't know if what SM did would qualify as a crime, or if they'd actually help. She also feared that would ruin our relationship with my father, with whom she was still trying to stay on amicable terms. Years later, she told me she regretted not calling anyone. And that's the story of how I got my first phone. For some reason, I really hate this story. So much that I avoid talking about it. This text was actually on my drafts for almost a week. It's far from the worst thing SM has ever done, but it still pisses me off. I admit that writing it all down did help a little, though. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.